Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the final episode of this year, Ghost Stories Live by the Fireside. Joining me tonight are my good friends. Hold on a second. My good friends, Bob Agro and Instagram Cosplay.
What's up?
You'll recognize Instagram as Deadpool and as one of the Mandalorians, Bob Agro. And they're joining us once more for the last set for the night. Again, Clint has been a part of some of these ghost stories that have been taken in as the Legends of Lacey Road, which brings me to what our topic of the night is. Everyone since childhood has had a little bit of a fear of the dark. And, truthfully, it's not necessarily a fear of the dark as much as it's the fear of not entirely being alone in the dark. I covered this in one of my previous episodes. If you recall, the story that I told at that time was of a lonely man who woke up in the middle of the night and he was in the dark. He was all alone. And he felt the cold, clammy hands of darkness wrapping about him. And he longed for the comfort of a lighted candle. So as he sat there fretting and wondering whether or not to get up and move and make his place known in the dark and find a light and light that candle, or just sit there and hope maybe he could go to sleep, he just waited and he pondered and he worried. And the cold touch of darkness just kept encroaching upon his senses, violating his very being. Then, in a moment, he convinced himself that everything was okay. I could reach out, see if I can find a light, find a match to light that candle. And as he reached out and began feeling around for a match, he felt a match put into his hand. That is why children fear the dark. It's why there are still some adults who fear the dark. And like I said, it's not the fact of the afraid of the dark. The dark alone can't hurt you. But it's the fear of not entirely being alone in the dark and your defenses being just subtly dropped as you fall asleep. And then whatever happens can take place and you're helpless against the things that are assaulting you in the night. Which brings us to our first true story of the night. This is a Legend of Lacey Road that has yet to be written and will be. But this, for the moment, the running title will be called What Was That by the Bed? You see, my friend Nathan and I were getting ready to go fishing with my father the next day. It was the weekend. He'd come over, stayed the night. We were playing Nintendo, having pizza and laughing, carrying on, just doing what teenagers do in that time, especially back in the early 90s. We didn't have cell phones and everything going on. Everything was pretty well analog, including our lives. Anyway, so we had carried on into the night, you know, just laughing, having a great time. When my father pretty much called up and beat on the wall like he had intention to do it. Boy, it's time to go to bed. And so it was time for the light to go off. We had to shut everything down. And as we were laying there, now, first of all, I want you to know, I had a fascination with Halloween sound effects tapes. I loved them. They were rather soothing for me to go to sleep by. Of course, growing up in the house I did, I guess it was just kind of second nature. But honestly, also the fact that I loved stories and things revolving around the supernatural. Again, my love for Castlevania, Ghostbusters, and anything paranormal related. This played into that. So I had Walt Disney's chilling, thrilling sound effects of the haunted house, which had some very good sound effects, for the time. But it was playing, and it was playing low. That way it wouldn't disturb my family downstairs, but I could kind of go to sleep by it and have basically something that would help build the stories I was writing at the time. Of course, I had a long way to go with them, but that's a whole other story. But as Nathan and I were talking back and forth and talking about the games and the weird sound effects and everything, there was an eerie sensation come over the room. You know that feeling when you're in the dark and all of a sudden you know that despite the people you know are with you in the room, you know you're not alone. It's the feeling when something has entered the room that you know doesn't belong. Kind of like when you wake up in the middle of the night and you feel something watching you, but yet there is nothing watching you, but you feel its eyes upon you nonetheless. And so it was with this. Only it wasn't that there was nothing there watching us. In the moment that, what's up, people, Santa? But in the moment that this feeling came over the room, I was looking around, and there, standing between the two bunk beds, or the two twin beds. Now, mind you, this is taking place maybe a few weeks before the incident where something was scratching at Nathan's foot in the same bed. But there between the beds was a goblinoid feature, or a goblinoid-like creature, standing maybe 2.5 feet in height. And he's huge. Yellow eyes. Good thing that's not a real candle. We could have some serious problems. But these huge, glowing yellow eyes just staring at me, almost with a bloodshot look. And I looked, and Nathan was too busy trying to go to sleep and talk, but he didn't see it. But it was standing right between the bed, and it was just watching us. So as I was still talking to Nathan, I acted like I didn't see anything. And up beside my bed, on the wall, I had this coat of arms plaque that had 2 swords and a morning star, or a flail, hanging from it. So I slowly reached up, just wrapping my fingers around the handle of that morning star, or that flail. And I brought it down without much sound. Of course, that was the end of that much sound, because as soon as I got it down where I could, I whipped my arm around quick, bringing the ball of that flail right down across the thing's head. And you heard the smack as the ball hit the floor. Of course, the creature was gone. But Nathan turned around. Man, what happened? What was that? And I was like, dude, you did not see that. You really did not see that. It seemed what? I said, what was standing beside the bed? You didn't see it. And I was like, that's what I just brought the flail across. He's like, well, man, if you make that much noise like that again, your dad's going to come up and bring something across your head. So, basically, speaking on disturbing pops and them sleep. But that was one of those weird instances when something was taking place in the room where we weren't entirely alone in the dark. Like I said, I grew up in the house on Lacey Road. I grew up 18 years in this haunted house. And there's countless stories to share, not just from me, but from others who have experienced weirdness and things in the house. It's like the night my cousin, Charles, decided to stay the night. See, now, my cousin Charles, the old house was like a second home. Now, I mentioned this in a previous story when I mentioned when he was on the phone and something walked in the door. Well, that was one of the events that led up to this event, which saw the end of Charles coming to stay the night at the old house. Now, the first thing I want you to know is it took me years to understand that this wasn't as a result of something I did, which I had actually felt like it was for a long time. I always thought it was something I did as the reason Charles quit coming. But what really happened, I found out probably 6-7 years ago. And everybody thought that it was the incident where the thing walked in the door and walked out the back while he was on the phone. But that wasn't what did it. Charles had come to stay the night. At this time, my room was still downstairs in that bottom room, which this room will have another story coming up right here in just a minute. But Charles was laying on the bottom bunk, and I was on top of the top bunk like always, when, according to Charles, he was just laying there, had not fallen asleep, but he was laying there and he felt something crawl on top of him. And he went to move, and it wouldn't let him move. It held him in place. And the more he struggled, the more it held him. And he realized at that point, whatever was going to happen to him was going to happen to him, regardless of whatever he tried to do, because he was being held helpless, bound to the bed. And he just sat back and waited for the inevitable to happen. Fortunately, it let off and he was able to go to sleep, although it was a very shaky and nervous sleep. But when he got up the next morning and went with us to where we were going, I think he was going on a trip with my dad and I. It's been a few years and I don't exactly remember what the events were taking place the next day, but when he got home, he went in, he got his stuff. Instead of staying the rest of the week like he normally would, he got his stuff and he went home, and he never came back to stay. Like I said, I thought for many years it was something I had done, because this was also around the time when a snowball fight took place, in which a snowball was thrown at me and I was standing too close to a tree. And when I turned into the tree and the limbs went in through my face. You actually remember that. I've I've told you about that a number of times when that incident happened. I always felt that something that incident had played a part in why Charles never came back. That maybe he felt somehow responsible for the events that happened, since it was he and I and some of my friends that were in that snowball fight, and he was supposed to be responsible for me at that time. So many years I thought that was something that was caused by me. Now I found out that really what had done it was whatever had held him, whatever had pretty much climbed on top and had pinned him to the bed that night, not allowing him to do anything but barely breathe. So, and that was why Charles never returned. At least not to stay. He would come visit, but he wouldn't stay any longer. Now, this is again playing on the idea of why people fear the dark. It's not the fact that they fear the dark itself, but they fear of that which they cannot see, which is in the dark, and not being entirely alone in the dark. And now that we're talking about that room, let's talk about one of those things, another one of those instances, another Legend of Lacey Road, which brings about the idea of not entirely being alone in the dark. You see, it was the year I was in 4th grade. It was the night that quite frankly, the largest snow I had ever seen in my life came to town. Now, granted, I'm from Caldwell County, North Carolina, and if we see a snowflake, school's out. Because people cannot drive in a snowflake. So, people can't drive in a rainstorm winter. That's bad enough. But let the snowflake, people really get crazy.
I remember that. It's about March, I think. It was actually later in the season.
It was. But what happened is the snow was moving in that night. It had gotten cold. And it was so cold that Pop had told Brigetta, whose room was upstairs, where my other room was. He told Brigetta to come stay downstairs in the room where I was, so everybody would be close to the stove and they could direct the heat a little better. Now, so Brigetta was staying in the room with me where we could stay, where the wood stove could radiate the heat in. We had plastic and stuff up on the walls. This old house was an old house, and it had more ventilation probably than, what would you think, a rat cage? Yeah, but
it was warm downstairs though.
Oh yeah, it was always nice and warm downstairs. But I remember a number of times waking up and having a layer of ice like that thick in your eyeglass that was set out. But so it was really cold that night, and Pop wanted everybody to sit down so everybody could, be close to the fire and stay reasonably warm. Well, Brigetta was laying there and having a dream. And sometimes in one day, you're absolutely right. But Brigetta was laying there, and she described it that she was having just an ordinary dream, like people do when they sleep, when out of nowhere, this was before the twin beds, before the bunk beds, I had this old red metal frame. And that frame sat against that same window.
Creepy window.
Yes. And Brigetta was sitting there. She was describing that she was asleep. She was just having a normal dream, and everything was fine. And then all of a sudden, her dream just shifted horribly, and she found herself from the outside looking at her body and me sleeping again in the bed, and against that window, and an arm reached in through the window and grabbed Brigetta and was strangling her against the red metal rods of the bed. And the dream was so vivid, this nightmare was so vivid, that it actually snapped her out of her sleep. And she woke up, and she looked outside, and the snow had been falling. And out in the snow, originating at the window, not leading to the window, but from the window leading away, was a set of boot prints standing directly at the window. The boot prints were so profound that Brigetta reached over and shook me to try to wake me up. When it didn't work, she took my head and proceeded to bounce it like a basketball on the head until I was like, I'm awake. Yeah. But when she got awake, she goes, do you see that? And I'm like, huh? Do you see that? And I looked outside. And there, in the glow of the window light, laying upon the snow, there, as certain as what Brigetta was saying, there was a pair of boot prints. The cowboy tip boot prints. In other words, there were cowboy boots, so you could tell by those things, but they were, or Western style boots, and they were pointed directly at the window and then turned and walked away again. The footsteps originated at the window, as if something was just materialized on the snow and then walked away. My dad wanted to play it off as somebody just walked up and walked away, but you see, new falling snow tells a different tale. Snow, no matter where you walk, you're going to leave a trail behind. This trail started at the window and walked away. It wasn't that they were there before the snow and then the snow, because I know a lot of people will say, well, maybe they were there when the snow started and then when they walked away. No, the footprints were depressed into the snow and then walked away. So, again, whatever was going on, Brigetta picked up on the wavelength of whatever was transpiring in that moment, when whatever it was or whoever it was materializing outside of the window. The energy transfer she picked up in her dream, the intent, the immensity of the resonance that was taking place. And to this day, we still have no idea who or what stood outside that window watching us as we slept before walking away. And also to this day, I still do not like looking out of certain windows at night, wondering if something's going to be looking back at me. So
I didn't like the window before you even told me the story. That's why I slept on the top bunk.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Now, those are, like I said, those three are Legends of Lacey Road. Those stories actually happened. What happened with Charles, what happened with my sister Brigetta, and the thing that was right there between the bed. These things actually happened. And, like I've said before, I share these Legends of Lacey Road because the ghost stories and things that take place in our world and things growing up, these are stories that need to be shared, need to be told, because, like scary stories and collections of stories like that, these are things that not only can people pass down their experiences, but also share in the enjoyment of hearing those things which are scared, and maybe find something they themselves relate to. And in truth, it's also a part of the history of who we are. Now, for the next story. Tonight, I've got something special I'm going to do for the grand finale for this night. But first, let's talk about a few odd things about not being alone in the dark. Have you ever walked outside into a hallway, maybe go somewhere, and felt something so oppressive at your back that you almost feel it pushing you? And while you want to look back and see what's behind you, at the same time you really don't. It's that horror movie feeling. You want to know what's behind you, but then if you turn around, maybe it's waiting for you to turn around so that it can pounce, like a jungle cat on the prowl.
Us walking back from the river.
There you go. Or, how about when you're sitting there and you're laying in the bed and then there's a crack in the door that's leading to the outside, and you feel the presence of something malevolently watching you, just almost like a lion waiting for its prey to lower its guard, and you can feel it so much you can almost see it. These are things that give reason that people fear the dark. And yet, what's funny is not all ghost stories take place in the night. The phone call incident with Charles happened place in the broad daylight. One of my co-workers went into a house in Newton, had the lights cutting on after him as he was going down the steps, and then had a basement door slam on him. Oh yeah, that old hospital in Taylorsville, yes. There was something playing around in the staircase when we were filming up there one day. Me and Crystal Cleveland was noticing it and just kind of keeping it under wraps, but the same staircase where we were all coming up. So yeah, I can imagine. And yeah, I've actually felt some presences in there that could make your skin crawl. I'd like to talk with you about that sometime. Evil Santa is one of the guys that is part of the Dusk, Devil's Daughter crew, I can't say. And yeah, he was just saying that the old hospital in Taylorsville, he gives a lot of the same feelings. And man, does it ever. But yeah, I'd love to talk with you about that sometime. Another thing that is just... No, I lost my train of thought. Sorry. But yeah, like I said, Nice.
Stacy in there yet?
No, it's just Evil Santa. And he's telling me about, he was telling me a little bit about about that hospital in Taylorsville. He likes to play with you. I'd like to know a little bit more about that history. Definitely. But yeah, And like I said, these things that are legends of Lacey Road, and a lot of the legends of Lacey Road, like I said, that was where my train of thought was. Not all of them take place in the night. Some of them are things that happen in the broad daylight. Like when we were having a Thanksgiving meal there, and the room that became my room and was Brigitta's room, it was shut off for a while, and everybody was up there playing pool around the pool table. Remember we had that pool table?
Yeah.
Well, we were playing pool, and in the guy in the stairs, interesting. I always felt something there, and I could hear him playing around in the stairs. That's pretty interesting. That is very interesting. But yeah, while everybody was playing pool, we thought some of the kids that were in there with some of the family had gotten into the room and was playing, because we heard stuff shuffling around and kids giggling and stuff like that in that bedroom. And when we went to open the door to get out, because you remember that door, you had to actually move the door to get open it.
Right, yeah.
Well, when we went to move to open it and tell the kids that they didn't need to be playing in there because there might be broken glass or something, there was nobody inside playing.
Think like Silent Hill.
I mean, so it was just... Yeah, no, that's fascinating. I'm gonna have to hear. I want you to tell me a little more about the guy in the stairs when you get a chance. That'd be awesome. I would love to know more about that hospital, because I know, man, you could definitely tell there's some what's up feelings in that place. Especially, there's another area that catches my attention, and it's bad enough that they have that one eerie, mannequin down there. But there's one of the rooms that's off to the back that has a really, really oppressive feeling to it. But that's another. That's another one of the things. Like I said, I grew up in that old house, and there are countless stories that not only myself, but another story to show that this house had a history before we ever moved in was in the time before we lived there. I was still too young. Angela Burleson's family and Barry Burleson's family, they still lived down there in that brick house at the edge of the field. Well, one night, now according to what they had told us, is one night, and Angela said she remembered hearing somebody scream, heard them and her dad hearing somebody scream out there in the middle of the field, and nobody be out there. I mean, you hear a woman screaming and stuff out in the middle of the field. And went out there to check and see what was going on. Nobody there. And there was another story that her father had looked at one night and actually saw somebody in the field, a woman in the field crying and screaming, and went out to go check on her to see what was going on, and there was nobody there when he got out there. And so, this house has
residual hauntings.
It has residual hauntings, and I think things that also were transferred up in the old wood from the events that took place down the river. So, given just a little more detail and background for this grand finale, but for the final story tonight is not a legend of Lacey Road, and is not one of the scary stories to tell in the dark, or an adaptation of the scary stories to tell in the dark. But we're going to conclude this night with the reading of a classic poem by one of my favorite authors and favorite literary inspirations and Gothic horror writer, Edgar Allan Poe. we're going to conclude tonight with the Raven. So, lights, poem, action. Okay, now.
And it's not that long.
Yeah, and it is. Fortunately, it's not this long. Anyway. So, without further ado, let's begin. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a rapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "Only this, and nothing more." Distinctly, I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, and certain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now to still the beating of my heart I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door." Presently my soul grew stronger, my hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is, I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure that I heard you. Here I opened wide the door, darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the darkness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, Lenore. This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, Lenore. Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber, turning all my soul with me burning. Soon again I heard tapping, somewhat louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at my window lays. Let me see then what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more." Open here I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with mien of lord or lady perched above my chamber door, perched upon a bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird, beguiling my sad fancy and smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore, "Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou," I said, "art sure no craven. ghastly, grim, and ancient raven wandering from nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is, night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Much I marvelled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevance it bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing a bird above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculptured bust above his chamber door, with such a name as nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely upon the placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if the soul one word he did outpour. Nothing farther than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely knew more than muttered, other friends have flown before. On the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before. Then the bird said, nevermore. Startled at the stillness broken by a reply so aptly spoken, doubtless, said I, what it utters is only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master whose unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster still. His songs in one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of never, nevermore. But the raven, beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, straight I wheeled and cushioned in seat, front of bird, and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, betook myself into linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, ominous bird of yore meant in croaking nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing, to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned in my bosom's core. This and more I said divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining, and the lamplight gloated o'er. But whose velvet violet lining and the lamplighting glowing o'er shall he press, nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer, swung by a seraphim on whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he hath sent thee, respite my pen from the memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget those lost Lenore, quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, I said, thing of evil, prophet still if bird or devil, whether thy temper sent, or whether thy tempest tossed thee here ashore, desolate yet undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore, quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, I said, thing of evil, prophet still. If bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore, tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aidenn it shall clasp a sainted maiden whom the angels name Lenore. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden who the angels named Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting, get thee back to the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as token of that lie thy soul has spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beat from out my heart. Take my form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, and his eyes have all the semen of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight of him streaming throws his shadow on the floor, and my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. Thank you. I hope everyone has enjoyed this last month or so, this last 2 months of ghost stories live with the fireplace in Fireside. It has been a great pleasure and a bit of a learning experience as we've done this. As always, with my drawings and everything else, I thank you for embarking on this journey with me. And, in the wake of this viral 2020, pun most definitely intended, I wanted to do something a little different since it's been hard for people to gather and do things, be it by gather around a campfire, having Halloween parties, or anything of the like. I wanted to make sure that we could do something that would gather people, even if it was over a particular time period. And in that time period, would allow us to share stories, allow us to tell tales, and bring us together, even if it's just in spirit, just under the cause of basically under a unified cause and a similar interest. And I'm hoping that everybody really had a great time with this. I had a wonderful time telling these stories. I feel that I've gotten better from the day I started till now. Although I still have issues reading aloud because my eyes want to read faster than my mouth wants to keep up. But I really enjoyed doing this. From the first night when I was in Helen, telling the long walk home and Cherokee dance, to tonight with the Legends of Lacey Road, scary stories, and next year I would also like leave in the comments below if this is something everybody wants me to do again next year. Because if this is something that everybody wants to do, I'll be more than happy to do this and tell even more ghost stories, not just Legends of Lacey Road, and not just write up some of my own ghost stories, but put out requests for ghost stories that maybe you'd like to hear told or retold.
Just folklore around here.
Yeah, local folklore, favorite ghost stories, or anything like that. And I would be most happy to incorporate these, or incorporate what I can into some of these stories, so that everybody can enjoy and maybe gather a greater crowd and spark an interest to to keep something fun going for everybody. Hopefully this time next year we'll all be able to start gathering around fire pits and fireplaces and telling these stories, so that we'll have a community group along with that, and perhaps even then pass the camera around and let some people tell stories as well.
Yeah, you inspired me. I may tell a story tomorrow.
There you go. There you go. And that's what it's all about. It's about inspiration. It's about bringing together. It's about fellowship, even if it's over a distance. And it's about the enjoyment of the stories being told, and the experiences shared by everyone that's been a part of these. Without the Legends of Lacey Road, to be honest with you, I probably wouldn't be the writer that I have been working to be. Because without those experiences and without the things that sparked me into pursuing the paranormal and the supernatural, I would probably not have had the same outlook on things that I do, which helped build the writer that I've become. And still working on storyteller. But I'm going to give a few shout outs right here at the end. First of all, I want to thank you, Evil Santa, for joining in this last few weeks. I've enjoyed having you in here with me. All right. I'm looking forward to it. I am definitely looking forward to it. But yeah, I've definitely enjoyed having you jump in here with me. Again, Instagram cosplay. I'm going to flip this around so you guys can see. Again, Instagram cosplay.
Just Clint.
And just Clint by day. And then Boba Egg Roll, which Bridget by day, and sometimes by the phone booth. And then some people that aren't here that I'd like to give a good shout out to. I'd like to give out a good shout out to my friend Chadamus from Moonrunner 83. He's been on watching these. I appreciate his support. If you've not listened to Moonrunner 83 and you like 80s style, synthwave, synth pop, definitely give Moonrunner 83 a listen. Good group, good musician. He has some great talent that comes on board. Like another friend, Megan McDuffie. She does a lot with Moonrunner. She also does a lot with video games and soundtracks. Check her stuff out. Both real good friends of mine. So I'd like to give them a shout out and thank them for their support and the love that they've shown in my videos and such. I'd like to thank all my Lacey Road gang, from Clint to Stacy to Nathan to Aaron to Angela and everyone and Barry and everyone that grew up on Lacey Road and has shared these experiences. It has been an awesome life having everybody as a part of it, and having everybody who's not only experienced these things but have been willing to share these stories. And like I said, I'd like to give a shout out to my sister Crystal, who had the fire pit ready for us a number of times. Well, hello there. And I'd like to give a shout out to my sister Crystal, who had the fire pit ready a number of times for us to gather around and tell the stories. You've seen her in some of the videos. If you've missed any of the stories that have been told from September up, they're on Instagram TV, so you can go back and watch every single episode from September 4th up to tonight. And then, let's see, other shout outs I'd like to give. I'm trying to think who else would I be? Definitely Edgar Allan Poe for writing the Raven, which I read earlier. But no other great shout outs. I'd like to give a shout out to Sebastian Michaelis, or Sebi, good friend of mine, and fellow cosplayer, for her support. Agatha Claire, everybody that's been on board and shown their support. And if you've been on here and you've shown your support and I'm not being able to name, it's been a long day, so definitely not trying to leave anybody out, but I would also definitely like to give a shout out to every single one of you out there that are watching this and have supported this season. Again, in the comments below, let me know if this is a series you'd like to see pick up again next year. If I do, it would pick up around September and go through October like I did this year, so that we have plenty of time to tell the stories. But also, if there's stories you'd like to hear told and retold during the next season, definitely put them in the comments and let me know so that I can, and with this being on Instagram TV, it's going to be there year round. So if you come up with something you want to hear told, jump on there, leave a comment, and definitely just let me know what kind of stories you want told, what stories, what's your favorite ghost stories or your own local stories, and so forth. Another thing that I would like to give a good shout out to is to Ron Rosman and the Dusk series. Give them go check that out. You can see it on Avail TV, through Roku, Amazon, or Apple Plus, and YouTube. All 3 seasons are up. Season 4 is getting ready to be in the works. A lot of good friends and such that are working in on those right now. And I come in season 3 and some cameos, and will be a part of season 4. So I can't disclose what's going to go on with season 4 because that's don't want to spoil anything. But I can say it's got some exciting stuff coming. We've got a great cast, so definitely get on and watch that, catch up, and let Ron and them know that that you like. If you like the series, let them know what you like about it and show them some support. Like I said, a great group of people. Couldn't ask. We're more like family than we are a cast of characters. So, and let's see. Yep, she sure is. I'm glad to see her jumping on board. That'll be great. Which her Harley makeup she did, that was rock. That was phenomenal. And speaking of Harley, we're talking about The Devil's Daughter. So be ready to watch for clips and trailers for The Devil's Daughter, which is a horror-based Harley Quinn story produced by Ron Rosman. Again, go check them out. I'm a part of that cast as well. And it also there's a lot of good actors, a lot of good friends, and it's a DC story written by a Batman fan. So that when you got fans writing something, they're not going to try and make it their own thing. So
like Michael Bay.
Pretty much, no explosions. But at least not that I know of. We haven't worked those details out. But But yeah, definitely go give Devil's Daughter and Dusk series. Check it out. Matter of fact, the Devil's Daughter is on the GoFundMe, and they are trying to get they pretty much have a deal going that if you donate $5 to the proceeds, you get your name in the credits. Again, check in with Ron Rosman on this. You can check it, and you'll see the advertisements and the videos. Definitely be a great part of this. And with that, I guess this is where we're going to wrap things up. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us on this journey. I'd like to thank Clint and Bridget for coming and joining me on these last couple of sessions. And I want to wish everyone a happy and safe Halloween. If you're able to go to Halloween parties and stuff where you are, have the greatest time you can have. But stay safe. And, I know the dad in me says be responsible, but, have fun. Make sure you're able to get home safely. And, just enjoy the season for what it is. Halloween's one of those nights when you get to really be yourself and nobody questions it. Cosplaying, everybody's a cosplayer on Halloween. So, you just get into the cosplay when you do more outside of Halloween.
You're never too old.
And no, you're not. And if you think you are too old, look at Hollywood. Hollywood's full of cosplayers and they play in movies.
And they make money.
Doing it.
We're just not making money.
Yet. Yeah. But again, thank you everyone. Evil Santa, it was awesome having you on board. And I would definitely like to get up with you, catch up with you, and get with you about some of the stories from that hospital in Taylorsville. I've actually sat in the parking lot and ate lunch there a few times while I was at work. So yeah, I'd definitely love to hear some stories there. Maybe even if we could do so, I'd like to go do an investigation there. That would be fun. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and jump off of here. Everyone, have a wonderful, safe Halloween, a good night, and thank you again for being on this journey with me. Be good, and I'll see you in the shadows.